I'm very pleased to introduce Jaime Velez, who is joining us from OQSIE, which stands for Operations and Quality Systems Improvement Experts. And he's going to talk about Quality 4.0, making the shift to continuously monitor the health of our quality management system. And I see some people from quality organizations in the audience. So for the last 15 years, he has supported more than 100 consulting engagements with life sciences companies, delivering significant productivity improvements in supply chain and quality systems. He started his consulting career at McKinsey and in the operations practice, where he led major improvement initiatives with J&J, Wyeth, Abbott, and BMS, among others, and then co-founded OQSIE in 2013 with Bill Schmidt. And the two of them led a team of 70 consultants supporting small and large biotechnology, pharmaceutical, and medical device companies. And before that, Jaime ran operations in the electromechanical manufacturing industry. He was VP of Global Operations at 3 mid-sized companies before transitioning to consulting. So join me in welcoming Jaime Velez.
Thank you, Joanne, and thank you for taking your time to spend with me this morning. Hopefully, this will be insightful and thought-provoking. My goal, as you walk away from the next 30 minutes, is to have you walk away thinking that there may be some additional things, and there may be some new ways to think about how to leverage some of the data that you currently have in your quality systems and your quality assurance activities. And we'll dive into a little bit of that over the next few minutes. First, let me tell you a little bit about OQSIE. We're, as I call it, a niche consulting company focused in life sciences, and within life sciences, we focus in manufacturing, quality systems, and supply chain related topics. And over the last 3-4 years, we've begun to develop technology solutions as a result of the consulting work that we've done. And some of what I'll show you here in a minute has more to do about the technology solutions aspect of the work and how it connects to the topic of Quality 4.0. Setting the stage, let me start with the Pharma 4.0 kind of uptake in the industry. And we captured some of the output from research, from LNS research and master control, where we see a significant interest, as I call it, right? 60-70% of respondents are doing something in the digital space, leveraging advanced analytics, leveraging AI. When we look at the level of utilization, as I call adoption, we see that extensive adoption, those same responses, are relatively low. About 5 to 10% of the folks that responded that, yes, we're doing something, are also saying about 5 to 10% are actually using that technology and leveraging the information in a systemic way across their companies. When we look at the quality component, right, so it's what I'm calling Quality 4.0, we see, I'll call it a follower evolution, right? We have about 60% of the companies that are doing something, but in effect about 30% of the companies are actively doing something on the quality systems side of things. Another 30 or so % are beginning to test the waters, right? They're in pilot stages. The rest are still thinking about it, right? They have plans, their ideas, their concepts, but we're still thinking about what it is that we're going to do. Which brings the question, what's getting in the way, right? What's preventing the progress that you would want to see on a topic that, again, is relatively interesting, right? There's lots of interest, there's lots of excitement, but still the uptake is relatively slow. I won't go through the details. I'm just going to emphasize on the left-hand side the unstructured data component of the barriers that you see captured on the left-hand side of the slide. That's where I'm going to spend a portion of my time today. We're going to talk about transforming the processes to take data from an unstructured to a structured data set, and we'll talk about an example. So the business case, which we always have to keep in mind, is there a return on the investment, right? Any time and effort and money that we're going to apply to this, where's the possible return on that investment? And I think the business case, as you see from the numbers, lots of opportunity, right? Probably don't need to expand on that. We all live that level of opportunity on a day-to-day basis. But fundamentally, when you start to think about this from a business perspective, there's a tremendous amount of money and potential cost savings that are at play. About a third of the companies identify that metrics, right, poor metrics, is an important barrier. Some of the studies identify a minimum of $65 million of additional net income as the potential value that could be gained by leveraging data in a more effective way. We also see other forces, right? So the financial forces that are very strong, the possibilities are very significant. We also see the regulatory bodies beginning to take a more aggressive approach in enforcing companies to leverage data and become more data sensitive and data driven than they have been in the past. We also see product complexity as another factor that's going to come into play. And product complexity, particularly adding more data, more information that has to be consumed, that can be leveraged to address the challenge of additional product complexity. We also see additional investments, right, and the competition for additional investments across the organization. A study by BCG identified that only 16% of the investments are currently being targeted to quality management system improvement initiatives and activities. So let's talk about this concept of continuous QMS health monitoring, which is something that I'd like to propose and position today as the way of the future, as we want to think of it that way, right? We have continuous monitoring of manufacturing systems. We should be thinking about how do we keep our hands on the pulse of what's happening with our quality management system, also on a continuous basis. So we'll talk through that. As is the case with most of our work. Everything starts for us at OQSIE with work we've done to help clients. And that's the foundation of the concept of continuous health monitoring comes from work that we did at a client. So let me spend a couple minutes setting that up before we go into the concept of continuous QMS health monitoring. Setup and the situation here was a warning letter. The FDA required, as it typically does in a warning letter scenario, retrospective and prospective reviews of several types of QMS event documents. And they were required to develop a comprehensive remediation plan. So the way that we structured that particular activity is that we deployed a series of proprietary templates and checklists that enabled us to automate the capture of the outcomes of those reviews. And by leveraging the outcomes of those reviews in a structured way, we were able to identify the improvement opportunities and the gaps on each one of the quality systems that were identified in the warning letter. And from that very data-rich data set, we're able to identify remediation plans to address multiple dimensions, and I'll show you the outcomes of that in a minute, or examples of those outcomes. But by leveraging that data, we were able to identify not only the fundamentals fundamental gaps on the quality systems, we were also able to identify other dimensions that were deficient for this client. So as we talked about the approach, templates and checklists that aligned all of the reviewers. So we had a team of 30 reviewers that were looking at all those documents. So step one, align everybody to conduct the reviews in a consistent way. Also enabled us to capture, again, the outcomes of those reviews in a structured way. By capturing the outcomes of the reviews in a structured way, then we were able to apply advanced analytics to generate insights across the different QMS components. So for example, when we look at the change control dimension for manufacturing, we were able to get an insight on, for example, the level of QA oversight that we were seeing reflected in those change control documents. We were able to gain insight on the level of impact assessment and effectiveness check assessment that organization was doing. Both of those were identified, as you can see them in red, identified to be highly deficient and a driver for the warning letter that they received. Their CGMP practices, or SOPs, were good. Right? If we had done a simple assessment looking at their SOPs, their SOPs were compliant. There were no real major gaps in their SOPs. But their practices were not very good. Right? They had good SOPs, but the practices, what they were actually doing and not doing related to their own SOPs were deficient. So by capturing the data in a structured way. We were able to slice the information and look at different dimensions of the performance of the individuals and the performance of the system, as you see in this example, in change control. We had the same kind of insights across the various components, right? Investigations, batch records, et cetera. So that drives us to the concept of leveraging the outcomes of document reviews activities. So let's dive into that. Excuse me a second. So as we see on the left side, if your organization it operates in a similar way as most organizations that we have supported, and most organizations that I've had conversations with, we're going to focus on batch record reviews just as an example. Batch record reviews, and batch records obviously are created. Reviews are conducted. The data is captured in multiple different ways, whether it's spreadsheets, whether it's Word documents, sometimes it's paper documents, or an email that's sent out to capture the outcome of that review. All of it unstructured. And the outcome of those reviews, and we're using the trash can symbol here to drive the point. In effect, the outcomes of these reviews are not being used, right? They're being wasted. Now, let's think of the possible insights that we could get out of the outcomes of these reviews. Let's talk a little bit about excuse me, some of those insights. First, what I'll call a true first-time right, meaning that first look at a batch record that your reviewer gets, and the outcome of that and the insights from that first review give you a true first-time right perspective on how your organization is performing. Think of the value of capturing that insight, capturing that information that's being collected, and developing insights on that information. Think of risk level. Right? What is it that my reviewer is seeing, captured in a systematic way that I can determine the level of risk that I have from that documentation that's being developed. Opportunities for improvement. Right. Again, think of the large amounts of input and insights that you're getting off of that initial review. Training effectiveness, performance. We could probably list 10, 12 other types of insights that we can get out of leveraging work that's currently being done. So the concept of continuous QMS health monitoring starts with the simple foundation. We're going to leverage work we're already doing. Right? So this is not about doing more work. It's not about doing work differently. It's simply about establishing an interface a structured way to collect the outcomes of those reviews and leveraging that information and that data that we're collecting, converting it into insights. Right? So think about the possibilities, right? So we're going to transform your current process, existing process, with an easy to implement solution, right? And all that would take, all that would change in this proposed process is that your reviewers are going to capture the outcomes of their reviews. Instead of capturing them in a spreadsheet, they're going to capture them in a structured format that will be established. And now we're going to leverage all that information to create insights and capture metrics and begin to influence the culture of your site and your company by leveraging, again, the information that's being captured in its raw form. Right? So again, back to this view, relatively straightforward process, leverage existing activities, establish a structured data capture way of leveraging those insights, and wherever possible and appropriate, connect to existing ERP and QMS systems to simply optimize the data capture process. Outputs that we envision are in real-time dashboards, the ability to drill down on what it is that we're seeing, and an alert and escalation system that will highlight when something is identified, when an insight is developed that require or the organization would benefit from escalation, and all that would be built into the process of capturing this information and making it actionable and useful. All right. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Hi, thank you very much. Really interesting conversation there. I'm wondering from a qualification perspective, is the system used as a management tool, or is that validated into the ERP and the QMS systems as a compliant interface?
So it can be implemented either way. Our typical implementation and the typical implementation of the systems that we have developed has been designed as a management system. So it's helping to improve and accelerate management decision-making processes. But the software is designed in a way that it can be validated if our clients choose to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. One question I have is regarding the sources of data. You typically have very different maturity levels, but also simply different sources, whether some of them might still be paper-based, some of them might have a very different format. What's your strategy on both acquiring the data, putting them in a data warehouse, and then processing them in a validated fashion?
So let me answer that question in two parts. So for the example that I was sharing and the topic of QMS health monitoring. Again, the basic design is capturing the outcomes of reviews. So there's a human intervention, or there's someone that's reviewing a document, and they're going to capture that information into the system. So the data capture question and process in that particular topic is defined, right? The other technology solutions, as you were maybe referencing, our approach is that we connect to the existing data systems through APIs, and we also connect to informal systems, right? Whether it's databases or spreadsheets that people are utilizing to actually clean up the data or to maintain the data in a way that's more effective for their own use. Part of our process is we'll map out the data that we need, where does it reside, who's maintaining it, and where are they maintaining that information, that data. We connect to it, and as you mentioned, we basically create a data lake that we leverage to then do all the different kinds of analytics and creation of insights for management teams.
Very interesting presentation. A lot of the assessments you mentioned, those are typically more qualitative. So I'm just curious, how do you quantify these things enough to get meaningful insights in your analytics?
So by structuring, and that's a great question, and that's kind of where the art and the secret sauce, so to speak, and the experience, right? So we're just leveraging our experience working with clients, solving these kinds of problems. But we structure the data collection in a way that enables us to create different dimensions and capture data that allows us to understand different patterns of behavior that we see in the organization. Some of it is qualitative, some of it is easy to quantify, but our goal is to understand the different behavioral dimensions, and we seek to structure the data capture in a way that enables us to do that.
So I actually have a couple of questions. So the first question is, it sounds like you're typically working with sponsors versus, and I'm curious if you work at all with contract development and manufacturing organizations where, you know, the benefits of this approach could actually be seen across multiple different sponsors.
So we haven't worked with contract manufacturing organizations yet, but we see the value, and part of what we're hoping to do is to begin to collaborate with those groups next.
So the second question, actually, and it's sort of in line with the question, one of the questions that I wanted to ask Carla this morning, where, you know, he spoke about how many thousands of people were hired and trained to operate in a GMP environment. And, you know, I was wondering what kind of amazing training program was implemented, and then how do you check the effectiveness of a program? So I was wondering if you can speak a little more on the training effectiveness kind of work that you do, and then maybe, if you don't mind, Carla, it'd be great to talk a little bit about, you know, the training programs that you use for work speed, because there's so many of the waste comes from operator errors in the industry, and so how do we deal with something like this?
Right. So, and that's exactly one of the major benefits that we believe we will see. And that's an immediate insight off of that batch record review, for example, where you're going to get that initial sense of whether people understand the documentation, the process. That's going to come through in that first review, right? And that's why documenting that first review before the request for changes, right? Before the request to correct something goes out, that initial check, that initial review is extremely valuable. So the ability to organize the information, and that's part of what we've done, right? If we organize the data capture in a way that helps us understand, are we seeing GDP errors, right? And is it associated with this part of the process or that part of the process, this second shift or first shift? So we have the ability to stratify the information in a way that helps us understand systemic problems, right? So the risk aspect is a systemic problem, or is this just a targeted issue, right, that just needs to be addressed with a small number of people.
I don't know if Sabrina can bring the microphone over to Carla. I don't know if I would love to hear a little bit on this, since we have a little bit of time left in the session.
Yeah, up front, let me be clear. We didn't resolve the problem of training, right? We thought very hard on how to minimize the risks, and there were two key decisions we made, right? The first one is recognizing that we had a bunch of people which were rookies. They were new to the pharmaceutical industry, motivated, well-educated in general, but no specific experience. And so we built an organization that accepted that, and so we made sure that in every team we would have, as a maximum span, 1 expert to 2 new people, right? So we recognized that was a weakness that we couldn't avoid, and so we tried to minimize the risk by recognizing the experts, matching every senior operator with 2 newer operator, and then monitor the performance to recognize who could graduate quickly to being senior, which was also a reward for the person involved. That was one aspect. The other aspect which was important, remember, we were manufacturing before having a process approved by the FDA, and the government was paying for it. So that was a fantastic training, right? Because we knew we were making batches that we had to ditch and dispose of. We took that as the training classes for the operators. So it was built in the process development and validation and setup of the equipment. We actually use more resources than we could have done if we really wanted to optimize the cost, but those resources were being trained during these phases. So these were the two things. It's public record that we had a major failure in one of the plants in Baltimore. That was due to actually a minor mistake by one operator. And it was so minor that it took weeks and weeks of investigation by the experts and the FDA and a bunch of people to get to the most likely root cause, but we never could actually fully pinpoint. But it was, again, operator error.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Well, okay, we can move on to the next talk. Thank you so much, Jaime, for great presentation.
Thank you.